Hello and welcome to the Walk Off, everybody. I'm Scott Belford. This is the Friday show, and I'm very excited about it as we do have a very special guest. Before we get into the introductions, I will say if you're watching this on YouTube, we are all so close to 5,000 subs. So if you have not subscribed to the channel, do us a big favor and hit that button. It does go a long way. Hit the like button while you're at it. Let's dive in. Thrilled to have returning to the show writer and analyst for MLB.com, Blue Jays insider extraordinaire, Keegan Mattheson. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Hey, buddy, how we doing? What time is this for me? 3, 4? I like it.
This is, yeah, you're up
I
there.
like coming back.
Yeah,
I
that's
like
right.
coming
Well, we
back.
love having you, man. We love having you. By the way, I think you put it out a few days ago now, but your Bo Bichette article just kind of going over how
Yeah.
much he struggled over that 81 games he wound up playing, the injury struggle, just how important a bounce back was. Great stuff. I always love your writing, which leads me to this, my friend. Your book.
Mm,
Are there pre-orders available yet? How close are we to getting our grubby little
almost.
Blue Jays loving hands on this?
Almost. I'm hoping around when spring training opens, right around that time.
Okay.
It will be a early half of the season release, we'll call it. I'm learning, Scott, how slow book publishing moves. And I am, number one, a very impatient person. And number two, used to everything I write appearing instantly online that night. So this is, they say it's often about a year and a half process from when you sign a book deal to when it's out. And that's going to play true. I signed this book deal last December at the winter meetings, and it's going to be the first half of the season the book comes out. So we'll have pre-orders, date announcement, everything coming soon. This time, I mean actually soon. I've been stuck
Yes.
saying soon for a long time. But I'm excited about it. We're in the process now of going over final edits. I've seen the cover. It's awfully pretty. Um, Thankfully, I got somebody cooler than me to write a forward, so there's a better name than mine on the front that I think people will be excited about. But I'm looking forward to it, man. It's at this point I have read this book, and what is it? 300 and some pages, 80, 90,000 words. Writing it was one thing. I've now had to read it about 25 times.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
sick of it. I hope that the first read for everyone else will be more enjoyable than my 25th read of my own damn book. But man, I'm finally getting to the point where I'm excited about it. I think the stories have held up. I was worried something drastic would happen in the year of writing it. Thankfully, I cover the Blue Jays, so
Yeah.
nothing big has happened. But I'm finally to the point where I'm allowing myself to be excited and get my head outside of the book itself. And I'm trying to let myself enjoy it. That has not always come easily to me in this job, but I think this is something I'll allow myself to enjoy. And writing the book, man, it really was a joyful experience. Like it was this job for me at times has, I've become bitter and jaded at times, and I've struggled in this job at times. And a lot of this job is taking some crap and asking a guy why he sucked that day. Hey, why
Yes.
did you allow 8 runs? Why did you do this? This book was more telling stories of teams that I grew up with, of players that I was interested in talking to, asking
Hmm.
guys, tell me about the best days of your life. Now, they're not all good, happy stories, but a lot of it was so much different than my day to day. And man, it was refreshing. I loved
I'm
it.
so excited about it, Keegs. Like I know you've told me a few of the stories that are in this book, and just like to get the full scope of it, I'm very pumped for. And
Yeah.
I like the way you put that too, because that's what I'm like looking forward to. Is it
Mm.
feels less like reporting and more like you got to catch up with some old pals.
Yeah, it wasn't strictly in the realm of, day to day journalism, which is refreshing.
Yes.
As much as I value the day to day beat coverage, and it pisses me off that it's dying in some
Yes.
markets or at some outlets. Call me old fashioned. I still think it matters who won and how the game happened.
Yeah.
Why they lost, why they won, who it mattered to, why somebody should give a damn. Every single day, I think that matters deeply. But this was a really fun opportunity for me to step outside of that and get away from the minutia of, oh, well, Chris Bassett allowed 6 runs today because his cutter was breaking 1 inch less, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I'll write that story 5 times this year, and by the time everyone wakes up the next day, nobody cares, nor should
Yeah.
they. It's factory work. With the book, I really enjoyed getting into some broader topics. And I guess as the book comes closer, I can speak less vaguely about all of these things. But
Yes.
a lot of it getting into some sections about different faces of the franchise and why they mattered, about players' experiences in Canada. Number one, coming to Canada, and is that a problem or is it not? I don't think it really is. The experience of being famous and young and rich in a big city like Toronto,
Hmm.
downtown. It's getting into a lot of these experiences for players that I do not approach or even have the thought to day during the
Hmm.
course of a season because there's a game the next day. There's a game the next day. There's a game the next day. And then getting into some fun chapters. I think people will either really like or really hate the Shohei Ohtani chapter. I think that is going to be quite fun. I enjoyed writing it very much.
Yes.
So there's some fun stories in there that folks have not heard yet as well, and I'm really excited for people to get.
Well, we will keep our eyes open, and obviously I will have you on the show here when we have more to like kind of announce here
Book
and
club episode.
book club it out. That's right. So you're back from winter meetings, and you did make me laugh a little bit when we were messaging back and forth there. You said survived winter meetings,
Hey,
10,000 dudes in athleisure wear, quarter zips in one hotel, a thrill, which did
oh,
actually start make me wonder what the vibes are like there. Like, what is it like with all of these front office dudes and all of these reporters and all of these agents in one place? What was the feel like around that hotel?
the winter meetings are the strangest few days of my year every year. Um, I like it. I like going, and I still believe. Now, the winter meetings 20 years ago were a drastically thing. You could spot an agent walking across the lobby. Now, if you do, that doesn't mean anything. They're probably just getting lunch, or in my case, it's like a $26 American cold sandwich from the lobby of this hotel.
Yeah.
But it's it's fun to have everyone in one place. For me, selfishly, I love it because I am the lone Canadian who works for an American company at MLB.com. This is my one time to see my friends and hang out and see these folks who are not an email. I'm up here on an island. You know,
Yeah.
if I worked at TSN or Sportsnet or a local shop, I'd see my people every day. But I'm kind of the it's like I'm the road salesman who comes into the office once a year for the staff party, and everyone's like, "Who's
Yeah.
this guy?" So it's great. It's fulfilling. The work part of it is interesting. Um, some people still do this. Some people want to make it look like they still do this, that they're grinding and working the lobby and flagging agents. That doesn't really happen too much,
Yeah.
unless you're a national guy, and that's not my game. I'm there much more for the story than for owning a scoop for 8 seconds on Twitter to get 20 likes. It's not as much my game, and that's a conscious choice. But it's more about getting together with the GMs. Each day we would meet with Ross Atkins, and then on 2 of the days we met with John Schneider. And in the middle of an off season, that's a good kind of reset point.
Hmm.
Um, the vibes around the hotel, though, dude, I've never been somewhere that big. This Dallas Conference Center, it was the Hilton Anatole or Anatoly. I'm not sure how I'm pronouncing. It is a ridiculously large conference hotel. Last year, it was in Nashville at the strangest, largest place I've ever been. And I was telling the story the other day. The Rule 5 draft, it was in one of these massive conference rooms down a million hallways. When I stepped inside the room, I got a little bit dizzy and like nauseous because of how big the room was. I looked up around. I'd never been in a room that big. I'm thinking like, what? It's so far outside my normal day to day. Conferences. I'm sure in 1988, the Northwest division of a textile company had a great 10,000 person conference at this hotel, but it seems so old school, to be doing all of it in person. And I
Oh
love that.
man.
There's still some romance to that,
The
and
Grand Canyon of conference rooms. The
absolutely,
joy. Yeah.
it's baffling. But like I told you, it's a lot of dudes who look the exact same.
Yeah.
Um, ba- I always feel a little bit out of place at the winter meetings. I say often, Gregor Chisholm, who covers the Blue Jays for the Toronto Stars, their baseball columnist, good New Brunswick boy, one of my best buddies. Gregor's like 6'6", 6'7", and the opposite of me. He's built like Kevin Durant, and I'm 6'2" or 6'3", and a little larger. So when he and I walk around, it feels like we are just like both Shaquille O'Neal walking around this conference center. And I guess naturally I have a bit of a rougher look. I don't know, but
Because you're
I don't
both all
exactly.
dressed in purple. No.
Yeah, I don't exactly have the athleisure wear, clean cut, up at 5 a.m. in the morning for a run and a green smoothie look
Yeah.
that most of the conference center does. And so I always find it funny when we stroll around the lobby and we're thinking, oh my God, we stand out. But interesting vibe. There's just the jittery, nervous energy of a high school dance around every corner. But a lot of dudes that look the same. And if you can pick out whose agent is who out of that crowd, all the power to you, because I can't.
So speaking of agents, Scott Boras had to have been the belle
Oh,
of the ball. Because it
he's
did
the
seem
belle of his
like,
own ball every day.
my God, Keegs, it seemed like every hour he was talking to a different
Yeah.
reporter, giving some sort of pun on his player, right? Fee, fi, fo, fum. Corbin Burns gets paid or you're a dum dum. I'm paraphrasing, but
Oh, exactly. Is anyone else sick of that? I'm sick of it.
it's
It.
so wild,
I
man.
used to find it charming, but now I just think, dude, you're like, you're good enough at this without this stuff.
Oh, man. So, like, with him representing so many people there, I'm guessing he was moving and shaking and a busy guy.
Yeah, he always holds court, both at the GM meetings and then I believe again at the winter meetings. There's an organized time. Now, most agents, you don't do this. There was one bigger availability for Joel Wolf, who was Roki Sasaki's agent, but just because there was a lot of interest from every market.
Right.
But nobody commands what Scott Boras commands. And he will have a scrum of media 200 people deep, um, which some of it is people who are there being useful. Some people just want to see the crowd. I think a lot of people just want to see the crowd. But he is one of a kind, obviously. And I think as we saw in the Juan Soto negotiations, he's really good. And I feel like I don't come back to that thought enough with Scott Boras. And I mean, it's like Scott Boras. Like, have you heard Taylor Swift sells albums? Like, I know I'm praising
Yeah.
the best of the best here, but it's still so impressive to me what he's able to do with these contracts. And we see it often in the off seasons. Even if he has a guy that you don't think is going to get a big deal, he'll drag it into January and he'll find it.
It's
But
true. And I
it's
mean, let's be
amazing.
serious, dude. He played that Soto deal incredibly well. And I mean, we're
Yeah,
talking like going back years to when he was still a national, right? Like turning
yeah.
down that deal to begin with
I remember
was.
thinking that was ridiculous to
So
do.
did I. So did I. I was
And
like,
Soto even
especially
coming into
when you
this
saw how he
offseason.
played in San Diego, I was like, is this
Oh.
going to come back to bite him? Nope.
And when you look at what this offseason shaped up as off the top, I didn't think he was going to get 765. I'm not going to revise history, not whatsoever. I would have guessed 575 to 6, maybe. If
Hmm.
he got 6, holy moly, this is incredible. Because Shohei Ohtani, who is a different thing entirely,
Hmm.
because he also pitches and he also brings you the Japanese market, which is a massive business consideration. It's part of why the Blue Jays were in on him, because you get
Hmm.
the Japanese market. If Shohei Ohtani blinks, there are 20 stories written in Japan about it. It does not compare to anything in North America with any athlete whatsoever. But Juan Soto, I looked and said, you're not getting that. You're not getting that additional media coverage. You're not getting an additional fan base, an additional revenue stream. But he's still good. Maybe 550, 575. 765 is wild. And it was a dream for Scott Boras and for Juan Soto because you had a perfect storm of a couple of teams who I've referred to, and I mean this almost in a complimentary way, as the eager younger brothers at the table, Blue Jays, the Red Sox,
Yeah.
who don't have that big guy just yet, but they want him. The Red Sox have Devers. The Blue Jays are trying to keep Vladdy, but this would be the move that launches them back in. So they're eager. They're chasing Big Brother. And then you have New York versus New York. That's
Yeah.
ego versus ego. And my God, at the end of it, which is why I picked the Mets all along, why a lot of folks did, you have Steve Cohen in his wallet. Like this,
Hmm.
Steve Cohen owns pieces of art that cost more than Vladdy's next extension might be.
Yeah.
Like the amount of money he has is not normal person rich. It is beyond what we understand. Signing Juan Soto for 765 million doesn't matter much to him.
Yeah.
It's all fine. And in the end, that won out. And God, what a dream to have a top free agent that you can pit New York and New York against each other because there's so much ego there. Oh my God, the ego. That's a beautiful thing. That's the human element of
Hmm.
negotiations that lets players win. And I want every dollar possible to go to players. So credit to Juan Soto, man. That's a hell of a deal.
Heck of a deal. And actually, before we are obviously going to talk Blue Jays here right away. We'll get into Vladdy extension, all of that sort of stuff. But I do want your opinion on these mega contracts because
Yeah.
they are becoming more and more prevalent around the league. But the risk of doing them feels exorbitant, right? And like development is not always linear, cannot always be counted on. Cody Bellinger feels like a real cautionary
Yeah.
tale with this, right? Because you put so much value on a guy's prime, and everyone in baseball who signs these mega deals has kind of dealt with already the fact that the back end is going to hurt. But as long as these prime years are great, and let's face it, if Cody Bellinger had been signed at 23 years old, coming off that MVP season
Yeah.
with the Dodgers, they would have been praised nonstop if they had given him the Tatis Jr., right? But then you look at what happened, right? 24 to 26 years that are supposedly going to be his prime, he was horrible. Rebound at 27, only to regress again at 28. And now it's like, yeah, even the short term deal that Bellinger signed last year, the Cubs kind of went out of their way to move him to move that money. So obviously this is speculation and you don't know what's going to happen, but I'm curious your thoughts on these mega deals and if we're going to look back in 10 years and be like the 2020s were known as a cautionary tale against these mega
Yeah.
contracts.
Man, it's you've got to be so certain of the player. You have to be so certain that they're not a dumbass and that they're not going to screw this whole thing up with something else, that they're going to take themselves seriously, their body seriously, their life off the field seriously. That's a massive consideration because when you hand this contract out, you are saying you are the face of our franchise. You're the
Mhm.
guy on the billboard, you're the guy on the side of the stadium. You are the guy that if we lose and get knocked out of the postseason, you have to go to the microphone and talk. At least that's how it should be.
Yes.
And it's dangerous, man, but it's turning into the only way you get these guys. And it's going in the direction differently, but in the direction of the NBA. And not always a bad thing. The NBA is exciting as hell for a reason. One
Yes.
of those reasons is big moves, big transactions. The NBA over the last 10 years, their salaries have absolutely skyrocketed. A lot of that in line with TV rights deals, which fuels this whole sports economy.
Yeah.
I think the NBA is a great example. The NFL, we're going to see that continue with big contracts like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to see these guys making that 50, 60 million a year. Hockey, always boring. But baseball, it's following. It's going in that direction. And you're also seeing it start to pick up the middle as well. You're seeing even some of these pitchers on 1 or 2 year deals.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, oh my God, like you got 14 mil instead of 9 mil. Okay. And obviously that points to Vladdy, man. Next year, it's before Juan Soto, I would have put Vladdy at maybe he gets in the 300s with another good season. Now he's getting in the 400s probably. And it's all moving in that direction. It doesn't matter that Vladdy and Otani and Soto are different players. They're drastically different players. But once teams start talking in the five, six, 700 millions, that doesn't go away. Agents and players are going to grab onto that and say, stay there.
Mhm.
This is the cost of it now. And teams are making money. When's the last time you saw someone sell a pro sports franchise and take a loss? Doesn't happen. So Vladdy is going to be the next big case. But getting back to what you were saying about the risk, go back 1 year and look at Vladdy and Bo. A year ago, I bet you I would have said Bo's the sure thing. Extend him, you're going to get a 290 average and an 800 OPS, 25 homers every single year
Every single year.
from the hardest worker in the league. And I would have said about Vladdy, I don't know who he is. Vladdy is going to point to 2021. The Jays can point to a guy with a 790 OPS otherwise and say, like, meet in the middle or goodbye. That's completely changed. Now Vladdy's the guy who might get 400 or 500 mil. Bo is the guy that people talk about like he's about to get DFA'd for some reason. One
Yeah.
bad season sure tanks you, I guess. But so much can change. And Vladdy has so much on the line this year. Now, normally, I think with guys at this level, that's a motivator that makes them better. I don't think you see too many guys at that level crack under the pressure in a contract year. Look at a guy like Marcus Semien in 2021 when he came in, what he did. Like, really good players don't tend to get crushed by that. I think Vladdy and Bo are both going to have good years and make a ton of money in a city that's probably not Toronto. But
Hmm.
it's going to be fascinating, man, because Vladdy, I guess along with Kyle Tucker next year, but Vladdy's the sexier name, obviously. He's got the flair. And yeah, I'm going to be sitting in some big, crappy convention center next year, wondering how much money Vladdy's going to get. He's going to be the star.
And that is a really good point that you say next year, because I was just going to bring up how likely an extension is, and it
Mm,
feels like it's less and less likely. And I know I just recently saw um, about this front office that they've actually only ever given out three extensions in their entire 9 years as a
yeah.
front office. The Randall
Who'd that be?
Grishik,
Grichuk? Yeah.
5 years, 52 million, right? Which swing and a miss a little bit there. I mean, it wasn't a horrible contract, but also I think they thought his ceiling was going to be much higher than it
Yeah, I
wound
still
up
remember
being.
being at the stadium that day and just thinking, like why? I don't know. It didn't sink the franchise, but
It didn't sink the franchise, but I
it
felt the
was
same way, Keegs. I
interesting.
felt the same way. Justin Smoke in 2017 got a
Oh yeah.
two-year, $8.5 million
Yep.
extension, and then of course the Jose Barrios extension
Yeah.
after trading for him at the deadline there back in 2021. So my question to you then is, this obviously isn't a tool that this front office feels is worth using that much, especially when you
Yeah.
look at other teams like the Atlanta Braves and the Los Angeles Dodgers, who extensions have been something that they really have put into play in their playbook. Obviously, with all of the attention around Vladdy, they're at least talking. Or do you think it's hit a point where Vladdy's like, I'd be crazy not to go to free agency. Let's just go into the season.
Yeah, it would shock me if he did. They would have to offer him the world right now. It's when you are Vladdy, even for a player below his level, let's even if you're Alejandro Kirk in a couple of years type deal, like that type of player where you're a starter but not a star, you get one shot at this.
Hmm.
And it's so attractive to have that shot. I don't know how it feels for 30 different networks to bid on me. It's got to be pretty fun. It's
Yeah.
got to be really fun because along the way, you might find out that yours is not the number one bidder. And in Vladdy's case, it takes it into a different stratosphere of bidding. And he just sat there and watched his fellow Dominican star, his friend Juan Soto, get 765 million bucks. Vladdy's realistic. He knows that his numbers are not Juan Soto's, but all of a sudden, your eyes have to be popping out of your head. And everything we continue to hear from the Blue Jays and everything they have shown over the years under this front office is that they want to be disciplined and have 100 meetings and set a number that they value a player at and try to stick to that. That
They sure
can be
do that
valuable
well, Keegs. Oh
sometimes.
boy, they
Oh,
stick to it
it
well.
sells tickets, baby. But eventually, you need to let some emotion in. And this is something I'm big on, and I've talked about it a lot this offseason around Soto. For these high bidding players, you can get the 60 million guy for that. You can get the 95 million guy for that when teams are not going to go 30, 40, 50% above expectations. But when you're talking in the realm of Soto and Otani and Vladdy now, there's going to be a team that says, screw it, we want this guy.
Hmm.
And unless you're that team, you're stuck there looking at your calculations with nobody. And this is something I think you do see teams like the Dodgers, sometimes the Yankees do well. Alex Anthopoulos and the Braves do well. Dave Dombrowski and the Phillies is another team I keep
Hmm.
pointing to. Teams that do make that bold move sometimes, where, yeah, it makes a level of baseball sense, but it doesn't need to line up and check every single box and match your valuation model, blah, blah, blah. Vladdy is going to be another case, as long as he even has a normal season, of someone where a team's going to come in and say, screw it, Vladdy's a really cool baseball player. We want him to be the face of our team and hit baseballs 460 feet in our stadium. Are the Blue Jays going to match that emotionally? Now, if the numbers in their ballpark, logically, I think they will,
Yeah.
but I don't know if it's going to stay in their ballpark.
And I
And
worry
for,
about that because I do
yeah,
think that it is I honestly, Keegs, I would be way more shocked if Vladdy's price starts with a three than if it starts with a five,
yeah,
which, I mean, we just watched what happened with Soto when there is competition in the market. And there's
yeah,
going to be for Vladdy. There just
sure
will
will
be.
be. The Red Sox are going to want him.
The
You know,
Mets have a hole at
Texas,
first
Houston, the
base.
Mets, everybody is going to want him. And if you to extend Vladdy right now, you'd have to be offering him 500 million bucks.
Mhm.
It's to that extent. You would need to overpay the overpay because he's forfeiting a once in a lifetime opportunity. Now, you can forfeit something for a few hundred million, that's okay, but you would have to blow his doors off. And I do not take the Blue Jays as a team that blows doors off.
I don't even think there's a number that could get it done unless you're really like you said, like I don't even know if five gets it done. Like think
Yeah.
about needing to go 550 to get it done, and there's no way this front office has those kind of fuck it
Yeah, I
moves
don't
in
think
them. They don't.
that's not them. I don't think.
That's not them. All right. So, if there's ever been a stat that kind of summarized where this team is at and the problems they've had over the last few years, it's the Blue Jays home runs per game
Mhm.
2021 compared to last year. So, Keegs in 2021, they were banging out 1.67 home runs a game at home and then 1.57 away from home. Last year, their home runs was 0.99, so under one, and 0.94 away from home. So
You can't
to
have a zero
go,
there.
it's so crazy, man, that in 3 years they went from the number one home running hitting team in baseball, almost pushing two home runs a game, to a team that can't hit one a game anymore. And listen, I know that Ross Atkins likes to get coy with the wording of this, right? And he doesn't want to give too much credit to the long ball here. He kind of feels like, that like 13-year-old boy who constantly is picking on the girl next to him in class, but really he really likes her, right?
Yeah.
Like they know power is needed here, right? I guess all of this to just ask you, please tell me, my friend, that we are not going to be without a cleanup hitter again this year, right? Right, Keegs?
It needs to be. It's the number one thing that surprises, confuses me with this team in recent years. It feels like 2021 scared them in a strange way of just power is such a valuable thing. And I think that it may be too simple of a thing. And what I mean by that is that it's if you just launch a couple homers and win, it doesn't look as smart as if you stack together a perfectly balanced and platooned lineup that strings together singles against certain pitch types, yada yada. Sometimes you just got to hit a couple bombs and win a game, even if it's not even if you don't
Smartest thing.
have to be
Yeah.
smart. And this is not anti-analytics. Analytics I love and they have their role and they do make the game better.
It's
But
anti-ego. No.
it is. There's a teams get in their own way sometimes. And the word damage has become my number one enemy. And It's a lot of folks in the Blue Jays know that. John Schneider catches himself saying it sometimes, and he'll kind of smile at me like, I know you don't like that word, Keegs, and I don't, because I don't like blanket words that mean nothing. I like words that mean things. I like I like definitions. I don't like vague terms that just mean nothing. Because once you try to mean everything, you mean nothing. And damage, it's trying to say, okay, well, home runs are good, but we can also get there with doubles and hard contact and this and that. You know what? That hard line drive out yesterday that was hit 110, that was actually a good at bat because, well, I cover what actually happens. I cover who won and lost the baseball game.
Yeah.
And over the last 5 years, I have not covered a playoff win. Look at the postseason. You see a lot of teams that are launching home runs. It's something the Blue Jays need. Some of that, yes, can come internally. Vladdy can hit more. I think Bo Bichette will obviously hit more. You'll get a little power from around the diamond, but they need to add home run power. John Schneider spoke to this at the winter meetings, and it was interesting because earlier in the day we spoke to Ross Atkins, who told us that there were lots of ways they can improve the lineup. Some of it internally, some of it with how they deploy the lineup. The word deploy is starting to stick in me a bit now too.
Yeah.
But how they deploy it, how they balance it, how they match up, et cetera, et cetera. John Schneider was much more direct, which I liked, and said that they do need a guy who can hit for some power around Vladdy and create a threat in the middle of the lineup. I don't think there was enough of that threat last year. And especially if you're going to lean into defense, add some pop on the offensive side. And
Yeah.
those added 15 or 20 home runs a year, if you're playing great defense, those extra 15 or 20 homers become 3, 4, 5 wins really quickly if you're playing those lower scoring tight games. And it's something the Blue Jays need to add. I've always been confused by how they talk about it because to me, power is a simple thing. It is hitting home runs, and beyond that, sure, hitting the ball hard, doubles, triples, etc. But it's breaking a game open quickly. And the last thing I keep coming back to, Scott, is that if you're trying to play the pitching and defense game, you need to play perfect baseball. If you have a little bit of power, you can screw up 5 things, hit a homer, everyone forgets. I write a story about the homer. We don't remember the error. We don't remember the bullpen decision because Vladdy hit a 3-run homer and you won 5-2. It's easy. So they need more of that, and they need something more than just the annual kind of Justin Turner, Brandon Belt, rotating DH type of thing.
And I think the words are part of the reason why this fan base has lost faith in this
Yeah.
front office, right? And I think that's really what has happened is the faith and belief has been eroded over the time here, and Ross Atkins speak just doesn't really do it for us anymore. When damage is good and runs batted in is overrated, it feels weird, right? So I know that we kind of mentioned they love being the smartest guys in the room, right? And don't get me wrong, because I do actually really like this Andre Jimenez trade. I think
Mm.
that it's going to work out. I'm betting against it being a bad contract. I do think that this was kind of a shrewd move, moving a guy like Spencer Horwitz, who was sort of blocked with where he could play, probably at his highest value for a guy who's younger with a higher ceiling and a bullpen piece they needed. That's not bad on paper. But where it gets frustrating is when you start looking at where he fits in and you're like, this does still feel redundant. I know that second base defense was a problem, but how big of a problem? So my question for you is, now that you've had a couple weeks to digest this trade and really think about it, what is your feelings on it? Where do you think he fits in 2025? And where do you think he fits in long term? Because, I mean, this is a guy under contract until 2029.
Yeah, this was not a move I saw coming whatsoever. I mean, a guy that was 2 years into a 7-year extension and a second baseman, which of course the Blue Jays certainly needed. It's surprising. It needs to be part of a bigger offseason. Andres Jimenez, as a player, fantastic player, and a brilliant defender. Not just good, he is incredible. He's going to be the infield Dalton Varsho, where on defense alone, people will love him. You'll probably want him to hit a bit more. Now, 2 years ago, he had the great offensive season. He's gone down and down since. The Guardians, the team who knew him best, traded him. So,
And
yes, the
let's
Blue
be
Jays
serious.
think,
They
yeah,
traded him for basically, please take the money off our
take the
books.
money. And the Blue Jays are optimistic that they can fix the offense and get that back.
Sure,
But
if there's anyone I trust to fix offense, it's the Blue
oh,
Jays.
there we go.
Sorry.
So
I'm
we'll
bitter,
see
guys.
if they get there. But I always try to keep in mind who traded a player and at which point, and the team that knows him best traded him at that point. So looking forward, I think he's a great second baseman this year. I think he's the shortstop in 2026 and beyond when Bo Bichette is elsewhere, probably.
Mhm.
But this needs to be part of something bigger. If the Blue Jays only fill in around him, for example, if the Blue Jays do what they did last year with a kind of IKF, Kiermaier, Turner type of offseason from here, then I don't get it.
Yeah.
What they need to do is add a big bat, add some legit offense, build out the bullpen more. I'm talking two or three more, not just relievers, but relievers we've actually heard of. And then maybe even some pitching depth, some rotation depth.
Hmm.
If Jimenez is part of a larger offseason, it is a fantastic move. If it is the headline move, I don't get it. So
Yeah.
and that's nothing on Jimenez, and that won't be his fault either way. I think a really exceptional defender, maybe he can hit a bit, but still, like Jimenez is a player that pretty much every team in this league would be happy to have in their infield. Absolutely. And I think he's very Dalton Varsho esque. But within the broader picture of the offseason, there really needs to be more. And there needs to be quite a bit more.
And I think, Keegs, this is why there was some pushback on this move because I was actually kind of surprised about some of the negativity behind it. And don't
Mm,
get me wrong, I understand $23 million a year at the
yeah.
back end. It's not nothing. It's absolutely not nothing. But there are still so many question marks in this lineup that just feel like if I guess this comes from what we were talking about earlier of there's no faith in this front office anymore because this
Mm.
does feel like a chess move that we need to wait to see the bigger picture. But every time there's a chess move and we wait for a bigger picture, we're like, "Oh, that was the picture all along." And, and like you said, if this is the picture of the team we're looking at in 2025, I don't get it. I don't
Mm.
understand their plan.
Yeah, there's so many times recently where, and I see it from a fan standpoint, where a lot of the times the fans, if the team needs a big bat, you just want to see them go get a big bat and do it simply.
Hmm.
Um, Not try to double down on run prevention and maximizing the efficiency of et cetera, et cetera. And I certainly see how the fan base gets lost in that because you see the names that are out there in free agency. You see the big bats, and even from here, you look at Teoscar Hernandez, who people rightfully love. Some of the other big power bats available in Santander, Pete Alonso, and on and on. It's that seems to be simple fix, simple problem. The Blue Jays have often gone complicated routes with this, and Jimenez is one of those. And if you continue down that path, again, you're trying to win games 2-1,
Hmm.
and you can't screw up if you're trying to win games 2-1.
The
Um,
AL East is a tough division to do that in too,
very,
Keith. Yeah.
very, and you're also making a pretty big bet by doing that in Berrios, Gossman, Bassett continuing to pitch well. I know Berrios is a bit younger of that group, but Gossman and Bassett, they're guys I would bet on every day of the week. But still, the
Hmm.
realities of an aging pitcher are what they are. Yariel Rodriguez, I love that signing. I think he has real potential. It's still just potential. Bowden Francis was the best story of last season.
Hmm.
Can he repeat it over a full season when other teams are really looking at him? Are you going to hit on every single one of those things I'm looking at? I don't know. So
You
there
kind of
needs to be
need to.
offense added on top.
Yeah. Yeah, there does. Speaking of offense, so Luis Arraez is one of the more intriguing dudes in
Yeah.
Major League Baseball right now because honestly, man, he hits everywhere he goes. And I know he's a slap hitter. I know he doesn't have a lot of power and it just doesn't feel like one of those top 20 guys in baseball, but he just gets it done year in and year out. And I know that he's a free agent at the end of 2025. San Diego has said that they are prepared to move him this offseason here. So, two questions for you about this unique talent. Number one, what is your guess on his free agent market next year? Because, man, am I intrigued as to how organizations value Luis
Yeah.
Arraez. And secondly, do you think that he is a fit in Toronto for 2025, being that Springer maybe isn't the leadoff guy that he was in the past, and it does get guys on? He's a guy who would get on base for Vladdy.
He is a very Jays hitter in that there's a ton of contact, a ton of strike zone control, and if that contact doesn't go too far, so be it. His free agency, I mean, Vladdy will be the big ticket, but his will probably be the most interesting from a real like baseball nerd standpoint
Yes.
because I think he will have the widest gap in how teams value him, and his agent will have the hardest job next offseason because some teams will look at that and say, well, we can draft and develop our own kind of muscled up Spencer Horwitzy type of Alan Roden type of hitter who's going to make all the contact in the world and get on base and maybe play a bit of defense, but without the power, like he has a peak of 10 home runs. Not
Mm-hmm.
sure if we'll get there again. Just four last year. Yeah, he's going to hit 300, hit 354 the full year ago in 2023. But if you're his agent, you've really got to hope that you get two or three teams that love him because his is a market that could maybe surprise on the under. It's
Yes.
it's a fascinating case of where baseball is at right now, and it's you've got to find the right team, the right fit of team. It's a conversation I had even when Horowitz was traded to Cleveland before he got flipped. That was more for position, but Horowitz as a hitter was a very Cleveland hitter,
Mm-hmm.
just like he was a very Blue Jays hitter. They value similar things in those organizations. And I think that Arraez is one of those. But man, he'll be hitting free agency at what, 28 years old, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just 28. He will get a long deal, but man, that's going to be interesting. Some teams will value him at a number that will be below half what he signs at, I bet. Like
It's
he'll really divide
weird.
people.
It's
Yeah.
weird to look at him and be like, I could see him getting 10 million AAV and I could see him getting 25. And like,
Yeah.
that's an insane gap, dude. Like, that is just so insane. So I'm excited to see where he winds up landing in the, again,
Yeah.
this is real nerd talk here, but like, I am excited to see how he's valued and evaluated by
Mm.
organizations.
It's always
All
strange when a
right.
player like that is traded a couple of times to it's just if he's dealt again. I mean, you say the same for Soto, but it's on one hand, there's it's good that he was wanted a couple of times, but I'm always fascinated when I see players of that caliber traded and dealt around. It's always makes me wonder, not in a negative way, but it just makes me like, how are you trying to do better than a guy that's hitting 300 with a an on base like that? We'll see.
Like it is weird how much he's been moved. It honestly is. And I do understand from Minnesota's standpoint when they flipped him to Miami and that like Miami needed a guy who got on base and
Yeah,
they were you know rich in pitching compared to most organizations. So that
yeah.
one made sense. But then it just was weird to see him being given up by the Marlins, which I mean I guess I get it. They're flipping him for prospects, but yeah, it's interesting to see where he lands.
All right.
All right, I saw this morning, and I really wanted before we wrap things up here. I got a couple more questions for you, but I saw this morning about Michael Lorenzen. I'm not sure if you saw this.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was just reading that actually.
Right? Isn't this crazy? So I'm going to read for everyone listening right here what Ken Rosenthal wrote about Michael Lorenzen. So he says Shohei Ohtani is the only player to qualify for two-way designations since Major League Baseball introduced the criteria in 2020. But the potential for right-hander Michael Lorenzen to achieve two-way status is creating a fascinating twist to his free agency. Lorenzen, who turns 33 on January 4th, has not hit in the major leagues since 2021 and has not had more than one plate appearance in a season since 2019. But not to worry. The idea conceived by Lorenzen and his agent, Ryan Hamill, could make the pitcher a free agent fit for non-contenders such as the White Sox and Marlins, and a coveted trade target later. Hamill, according to sources briefed on the conversation, is talking with such clubs about signing Lorenzen, getting him the necessary plate appearances to qualify for two-way status, then flipping him to a contender at the deadline who wants to carry a 14th pitcher, because the rules are, since June 20th of 2022, the league imposed a 13 pitcher limit on each 26-man roster. So this is a way to circumvent that 13 pitcher rule and add an extra arm to your roster. Now, this is some smart chess move gaming idea. Do you think it works out? Do you think that there is a team like the White Sox that are like, we're so bad, sure, we'll get Michael Lorenzen up there to pinch hit 20 times so that he's a
Man, it feels like something that could happen once, and then a year from now, there's something called the Lorenzen rule that prevents it again. It's interesting as hell. And I'll tell you what, like finding a loophole like this is what people in MLB front offices dream of when they go to sleep at night. Like since the Moneyball era is over, nobody's discovering that on base is good anymore. People are fighting for millimeters, not
yes.
miles. And when a front office or an agent finds something like this excites those people. And ooh, it's interesting. I think it would be a bad look on the team that does it.
I think so too,
I
because
think
you're
it would be a tough
basically like,
sell.
we don't care
Yeah, you're
about
admitting
these
you're
at
not trying to
bats.
win as much as you can be, which is real tough. Now, if you're the White Sox, that might just be upsetting a couple dozen people, but those couple dozen people, White Sox fans, you still matter. Damn it,
Yes.
that's tough.
Yeah, so intriguing. Last question, my friend, and I
Yeah,
always appreciate you being on the show. Thank you so
absolutely.
much for how generous with you are with your time here. So, it was reported yesterday Spencer Steer, stud
Yeah,
first baseman and third baseman out of Cincinnati, is available in trade, which is wild, being that he doesn't even start arbitration until next year. And obviously, he would be expensive as a young, controllable guy. That said, it was reported there's an AL East team that was interested in him. He does seem like a fit for the Blue Jays. Can you see the Jays being in on a player like this? And do they even have the assets, the prospects to pull something like this off?
I think something up this alley would make a lot of sense for them because it's a way to begin to extend the window beyond Vladdy, even though the window should be Vladdy. But realistically, you need some players who can play here 26 and beyond. Third base is a confusing position for them right now. I don't know if
Hmm.
Will Wagner can be that guy or Elvis Martinez defensively at third base. I don't think so long term. You're still looking for the guy that's going to really be there long term. Ernie Clement, defensively, I love his offensive profile is fun, great dude.
Hmm.
Hope he plays all season on this roster. But we're thinking about 3, 4 years down the road,
Yeah.
and a move for someone like Steer up that alley that has some years of team control left, that might be a good use of the Blue Jays assets, whatever trade assets they do have. Now, their system doesn't match up against many teams. It just doesn't. The Blue Jays have done an okay job of developing big leaguers.
Hmm.
Davis Schneider, Spencer Horwitz, Barger, Jimenez, that type of big leaguer. They have not done nearly a good enough job of developing a pitcher, B, a guy that raises the ceiling. And if you're in talks for someone like a Spencer Steer, somebody in that 25, 26, 27-year-old range where you are trying to trade for their prime years, the other team's going to want a guy back who could be a star, who
Hmm.
could be better than this guy. I don't know if the Blue Jays have many of those. Arjun Namala is an opportunity to really dream on upside, I believe, but shouldn't the Blue Jays want that? They they're lacking quantity at the top.
Yeah.
If you had Arjun Namala times five, sure, you take a couple of those real high end blue chip prospects, flip them, and hope you've traded the right ones. But you're really, in terms of offensive players, you're looking at guys like Namala or Elvis Martinez. We need to see him prove it again post PED suspension.
Hmm.
And again, defensively, I don't know. So it's tough prospect wise. And really, I mean, every single problem we've talked about can be traced back to the farm system.
Truly.
If you develop one or two more stars along the way, then you've got an extra 20 million bucks that you're not spending on a free agent right now that can go somewhere else. It's especially on the pitching side. My goodness, I know they've had some bad luck with injuries. Ricky Tiedemann, foremost among them, unfortunately, who's
Hmm.
the most fun pitcher I think I've ever seen throw in spring training, but unfortunately, it's been limited to a lot of spring training. Without developing that next star, or at least above average starter in the big leagues, you're really hamstringing yourself in every possible way. And I think we're going to, unless this is a massive bounce back season from the farm system, I think that's going to become like storyline number one a year from now. Of like, if Vladdy's gone and Bo's gone, who's next? And I don't know if there's going to be as many answers as people want there to be.
Yeah,
Optimistic note to end. It could always get
exactly.
worse.
It
There
can
we go.
always get worse,
I'm a
folks.
big believer in
Enjoy where we're at.
that.
Keegan, thank you so very much for joining us here. For all of you
Absolutely.
listening right now, you can check out Keegan Matheson's writings at MLB.com. Keep an eye out for his book. It is coming out in the spring, and we will have him back when we have more definitive answers on dates and so on and so forth. My friend, all the best to you. A very happy holidays to you and yours. Enjoy your time out east. And yeah, thanks again, buddy.
Absolutely. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll do it again soon.